right, Simon, back over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Hello, good evening, and welcome to our viewers on CVM TV and those of you online at cvmtv.com. This is Live at 7 on February 6th, and of course, it would be the 69th anniversary of the birth of Robert Nesta Marley. I'm Simon Crosskill. Now, it was World Wetlands Day on February 2, and tonight we're going to discuss why wetlands are important to you. You may not know it, but they are. Now, you can join our discussion by chatting with us on Facebook, Live at 7 CVM TV, or send a tweet to Live at 7 JA. The hashtag this evening is Wetlands. All right, now let's hear from Garfield Burford with what's happening now.
Thanks so much, Simon. So Prime Minister Portia Simpson-Miller has commented on the gruesome killing of an 8-year-old St. Thomas girl on Monday of this week. Selena Edmond reportedly went on an errand and was dragged into bushes in Top Hill District. Mrs. Simpson-Miller, in her speech at a function in honor of her 40 years in politics, said violence against children should be scorned by the society.
And what happened in St. Thomas must be condemned. You know, I'm very angry. If my mother and father and the community of Woodhall, Marley Hill, Belfield, and the neighboring communities took care of all of us as children, even if we did not come from their community, once we entered their community, they sought our care and protection. And an 8-year-old girl, she could very well become the next female Prime Minister of Jamaica.
Now, the 8-year-old, as we reported on Tuesday, while she was bound, reportedly raped, and her throat slashed. Mrs. Simpson pointed out that fresh amendments are coming in the Sexual Offences Act to impose harsher punishment for the perpetrators of violence against children. She, however, did not say when this would happen. There was a major development in the Cartel murder trial today. The tattoo artist named we're not giving his full name, now the star witness for the defense, or for the prosecution, returned for the second time in this trial when he appeared on Thursday. He is to be the last witness for the Crown. Now, a male voice that had been heard by the court on the expletive-laced, murder-threatening voice notes was attributed to Adidja Vibes Cartel Palmer by the artist. Now, the tattoo artist, who said he used to lock shoes, the slang used to refer to guns for Cartel, said the voice note on all 24 recordings belonged to the entertainer. For instance, voice note number 3 heard Cartel threateningly saying, "May I kill one if them no bring back my shoes by 8 o'clock, in a bad man." Now, in response to that voice note, the witness said, "A Cartel voice, sir." Now, that in fact was his response for the other 23 voice notes. Now, voice note number 5 heard Cartel saying, quote, "Me just have to call the boy wee and lizard and this them up wicked." Now, at this point, the witness explained that his nickname was Wee. In voice note number 6, Cartel made mention of, quote, "a one pop them have up there." Justice Lennox Campbell then inquired of the witness, what is a one pop? To which the witness said it is, quote, "a homemade gun." You're going to hear much more from that trial today. That trial resumes on Monday, the intrigue heating up, certainly, Simon.
Indeed. All right, thanks a lot, Garfield Burford. More at 8 o'clock in Newswatch. All right, as I mentioned, World Wetlands Day was on February 2, and I don't know how much you know about the wetlands and the role they play in keeping our oceans clean, or our rivers clean, or our fish stocks safe, but that's the role they play here in Jamaica. We're going to hear more about that.
NEPA is celebrating World Wetlands Day. However, after conducting my own research on the wetlands, I wondered why. So Live at 7 went for a drive to the Palisadoes protected area with environmentalist Peter Espute. But before he tells us about the biggest issues at hand, what are the wetlands anyway?
In Jamaica, we may have 3 or 4 different types. The major type that we have is a mangrove wetland, or a mangal. We have another type in Jamaica called the salt flat. And it's not a very large, you see, those are the 2 main ones, the mangroves and the salt marsh. And we have another kind which is called the salt marsh. The largest salt marsh in Jamaica is the Black River Upper and Lower Morass, a huge salt marsh. And
What purpose is
that salt marsh is the habitat for a lot of creatures, most notably shrimps. And if you ever drive through Middle Quarters in St. Elizabeth, from even before you reach Milk River, from the turn off to, not Milk River, Middle Quarters, from the turn off to YS, you see the ladies on the side of the road with the shrimp selling. And the shrimp that are grown there provide an income for hundreds of people, support thousands of people. You know, we've tried to grow shrimp in Jamaica by using mariculture. It hasn't worked. But those wetlands there, the Black River Morass, have been producing shrimp for thousands of years successfully. Again, you know, we try to think that modern technology can do better than nature. Well, we haven't been able to, not in the Black River Morass. We have one mountain wetland in a place called Mason River in Clarendon. Mason River is a reserve created many years ago by the Institute of Jamaica. I'm sure that there are tours being organized today for people, school children and others to look at the Mason River Reserve. I've been there several times. And it has plants that are found nowhere else in Jamaica. For example, there is a plant that eats animals. A type of plant that, it's the Venus flytrap everybody has heard of, but that's not a Jamaican one. But it's another flytrap, but not the Venus one, another one. And so the plant is like this, and when the insect comes to eat the nectar, it just grabs them, and then it puts acids and enzymes, digests them, and eats them. So here's a plant that eats animals, and it's only found in the Mason River wetland, which is a reserve protected under the laws of Jamaica.
This red one, this is also an insectivorous plant. It works like an hand. So you see, it has sprangs like fingers, but it has glues on the ends of it. So once the insects go on like one of the sprangs, it will just go in and the other sprangs just wrap around it. And it just get the nutrients. Once it's finished with it, it just opens and let it off. Sphagnum mass, this right here. Back in World War I, sphagnum mass was used to bandage wounds because of its ability to hold fluids. They say it can hold 40 times its weight in water.
En route, he began to explain the importance of our wetlands.
Seashore, were it not covered with vegetation, would erode, would wash away. And islands like ours would fall into the sea. Because as the sea comes and hits the shore, it will simply carry away the sand.
Protected wetland sites are called Ramsar sites. Espute explains why.
The Ramsar Convention is the United Nations convention that deals with the protection of wetlands. Now, when a wetland like the Black River, for example, Black River Morass, is declared a Ramsar site, that means that it has been determined by the government and that the UN agrees that this is a wetland of global significance. The Ramsar Convention does not provide any protection for those wetlands. In other words, if you go into a Ramsar site and chop down the place, the United Nations is not going to come after you.
The stones on the side of the Palisados Road have been put there for the very same reason that we should protect our wetlands.
That wall has not yet been tested. One day we will know whether, when the force of the sea licks it, whether it's not just going to push the rocks into the sea, into the road rather, and make the matter worse. We will have to wait to see whether this will be effective or not.
But are they as effective?
You know, the cost of building a wall to perform the function that this mangrove performs free of charge is immense. And in fact, the wall will not work. Nowhere in the world have walls been built that can do a job as mangroves in protecting the coastline from erosion.
So, if it is unclear what will happen when a significant storm surge hits the Palisados, was an environmental impact assessment even conducted?
When the Cubans were to have done it, there was an environmental assessment for a smaller thing. But this job that the Chinese did under Mr. Mike Henry, they decided not to do an environmental impact assessment for this. So the truth is that this has not been assessed.
But for the side with the mangroves, the answer seems far more predictable.
You might remember that in Southeast Asia a few years ago on Boxing Day, there was a huge tsunami that killed almost 300,000 people, 285,000 people I think it was. And what they noticed was that those places that had chopped down their mangroves, they had the highest number of people dying by drowning. And those places that had healthy, intact mangroves, they had very few people dying, relatively speaking, because the mangroves were able to protect the people from damage. Over there you see the airport runway, because we're at Palisados and you just saw an airplane taking off. Now the airport runway is behind those mangroves there. And what those mangroves are doing, they are sheltering the airport runway from storm damage. It's unlikely that that runway will be flooded if there is a tsunami or a storm surge. If it is flooded, it will not be from this side.
It seems nothing could be more effective than regulation.
We have to protect the wetlands, first of all, by having some laws that protect them. Right now, there are no laws that protect them. Anybody can go and chop down a wetland with impunity. You do, however, under present law, require a permit before you do that. But we know that a lot of people don't bother with these permits. They're just going with the bulldozers and bulldoze, and then afterwards you come and say, but you needed a permit. They say, sorry, but it's done already. And nobody wants to take them to court because they say they are supposed to be businessmen who say they are providing jobs for Jamaicans, and nobody wants to harass the private sector. But often the private sector, meaning anybody except the government, are the main ones that damage the wetlands. Sometimes it's the government also that damages wetlands. When they were building the Palisados Road, the highway, wetlands were, some mangroves there were destroyed. And so the government, you could say, is implicated in that. But no mangroves have been replanted. You see, that's the other thing. The National Environment and Planning Agency will give somebody a permit. Yes, you can destroy some wetlands, some mangroves, but you have to plant back. And then they don't go back to see whether they fulfill the terms of their permit.
Of course there is protection, but it only exists on paper.
Would you believe that even now, there is not one piece of legislation to protect the Black River morass? Nothing. It is Jamaica's oldest Ramsar site, and it has no protection. Right where we are now, the Palisados Port Royal protected area, this is also a Ramsar site. There are no regulations to protect these mangroves. The Portland Bight protected area is another Ramsar site. No regulations to protect the mangroves or any part of Portland Bight. For even though Portland Bight is protected, there are no regulations to protect them. So it's paper protection. It's a sham protection. And what we hope is that every year on World Wetlands Day, which is February 2nd every year, that enough awareness will be aroused in Jamaicans that we will pressure our governments, pressure our MPs who go to Parliament to pass laws to protect our wetlands.
All right, now it's said that some $200,000 US to $900,000 US is a scientific estimate of the value of 1 square kilometer of wetlands. In Belize, mangroves estimated to provide for free $123 to $167 million US in coastal protection every year. Now the equation is that if you didn't have the mangroves, you'd have to have something there which would cost you all of that to protect your coastline. So what are we doing to ensure that we save that kind of money and lives in the case of a natural disaster? Well, with us in studio, we have Aisley Henry. He's the National Ramsar Committee. Dion Rose is Manager, Public Education and Corporate Communications. And Brandon Hay, the Science Officer of the Caribbean Coastal Area Management Foundation. Welcome all.
Thank you.
So a gloomy picture painted by the environmentalist Dr. Espute, suggesting that maybe we aren't doing enough or we're not serious about protecting our mangroves. Is that your feeling?
Well, I agree with Peter that we're not doing enough, but to say that we aren't serious is not true. I believe that certainly over the last few years, the government has tried, by virtue of the enactment of several pieces of legislation. He mentioned the permit and license regulations. And those regulations, though apparently Peter doesn't believe they work.
What does the committee do, actually?
Well, the National Ramsar Committee is an advisory body that was set up to advise the National Environment and Planning Agency.
So it's another agency set up to advise the agency?
No, it's just a committee of NGOs, the National Environment and Planning Agency itself, the Institute of Jamaica, and several other government and non-government organizations.
Well, there's a sense that, I think Peter Espute suggested to it, that NEPA has given permits for people to remove mangroves on the basis that they then replant them, and he's saying that nobody monitors to see where it happens. How often does that happen?
I don't think the basis upon which we grant the permits is that they're going to replant somewhere else. A mitigation measure that is often employed is that they would have to replant somewhere else. And there is monitoring that happens. And he is right, in some instances, the mangroves have not yet been replanted, as in the case at Palisadas. But I can tell you that we've been in earnest discussions with the government, and that before the end of this year, we expect that there will be replanting done along the Palisadas Strip.
Okay. Dion Rose, what sort of public education do we do in relation to wetlands? I'd imagine there's a lot of talk about it at schools.
Yes, but we also do public education in terms of, for example, NEPA has partnered with the Montego Bay Marine Park Trust to do several activities in school, but also it involved mangrove replanting in the Almond Tree Beach and River Bay Fishing Village in St. James. That activity started last week, Friday. And on Sunday, we had a national church service at the